Okay, so tonight I've got for you three folk tales. Two are from Canada, Native American folk tales, and one's closer home in the United States. Uh, so without further ado, let's get to it. Many a year ago, two Mi'kmaq warriors from rival villages got into a terrible argument. Harsh words were exchanged, and then knives were pulled. This one's called the Bloody Knife. The warriors battled, and the warriors battled back and forth on the banks of a small creek. They fought with the ferocity of grizzlies, tearing at each other with their knives, ripping at each other's clothes and hair. Suddenly, one of the warriors slipped on the muddy bank and fell into the waters of the creek. His bloody knife slipped from his hand and sank down and down to the bottom, landing upon a rock just beyond his reach. The warrior strained his pain-racked body towards the knife as his blood filled the waters of the creek. But it was just beyond his fingertips. He thrashed and clawed towards his knife, desperate to reach it before his rival killed him. But no matter how he stretched, it always slipped out of reach. On the bank above, the victorious Mi'kmaq warrior saw his rival sink into the blood-stained waters and lay still, the knife just a hair breadth beyond his fingertips. He did not rise again. The fallen man's people found him a few hours later and tenderly rescued his body from the rippling waters of the creek. But when they tried to retrieve his bloody knife from the rock beneath them, it always slipped beyond their reach, though the creek was not deep. Many a year has passed since that bloody day by the creek, and still the blood-stained knife lies beneath the rippling waters of the creek. Whenever anyone tries to reach it, the knife slips out of reach. It is like trying to touch something on the bottom of the sea. Although the creek itself is not deep, even the rushing waters of the spring season do not move the mysterious knife or wash away the blood staining its blade. For this reason, the creek is called Wokan, meaning knife, by the Mi'kmaq people, and the white men call it Bloody Creek. That explains some stuff. For I guess people just make up these stories to make sense of the world. Like what was that thing Romeo and Juliet was based on? It was the Greek myth about two kids fell in love, but their parents didn't want them to get in love to marry, so they had to elope, and they ran to the cemetery, and while she was waiting for him, she got eaten by a tiger or something, and blood got on the bushes, and they said, "Oh, that's why the bush is all red and stuff." I don't know, it's pretty weird. Okay, the next one's also, these are both, Canadian, but, the Mi'kmaq tribe is, a Canadian Indian tribe. Now, this one's from Alaska, so not really Canadian, but, it's still up there. It's called How Selfishness Was Rewarded. Tlingit tribe. It's by the Tlingit tribe. So I guess this is how they explain, or how they pass along their teachings of right and wrong, and the whole concept of selfishness and their morals. So a young warrior came to the coast with his wife and mother one summer and settled in the place where Sitka now stands. It was a summer of hardship for the family because the fish stayed away from the coast and the game had moved far away over the mountains. The warrior set traps and lay nets in the water and wandered many miles hunting for food. But he found nothing. The family had to eat berries and green sprouts and dig for roots to eat. Even so, there was barely enough each day to keep the family going. The old mother, who was nearly blind, began to lose health and strength as days went by with little food. In sharp contrast to this was the pretty young wife who stayed strong and healthy and just picked out her meal each evening. This puzzled the young warrior, who felt himself losing his vigor as the days went by, that he could find no reason for good health in this time of adversity. Then his old mother came to her son very early one morning and told him a sad and cruel story. The old mother had awakened the night before from a dream of cooked fish to smell the reality in the air. She opened her old eyes and saw a fish roasting on a small, flickering fire. The starving old mother saw her son's wife crouched near the fire, and she heard the girl eagerly chewing the hot fish. The old mother cried out to her son's wife to give her a morsel, but the girl was selfish and told the old woman that the fish she smelled was just a dream. When the old mother begged for just a single bite of fish, the girl denied her request. The old woman kept up her cries until the selfish girl took the bare bones from the last fish and thrust them into the old woman's hands, burning her flesh. Then the old mother wept bitter tears and retreated back to her corner. When he heard his mother's story, the warrior cautioned her to say nothing to his wife. When the selfish girl awoke, the warrior treated her in his customary manner, but he kept watch to see what she would do. That night, when she thought everyone lay sleeping, the young wife crept down to the shore and summoned a school of herring to the shore using a magic spell. She whipped two of the largest fish into her basket and took them back to the lodge to cook. Unbeknownst to her, the warrior had followed his wife. He took care to memorize the strange words of his wife's spell, and then slipped quickly back to the lodge and into his blankets before she returned. He lay so still that the girl never suspected that he was watching as she cooked and ate the fish, carefully burying the bones so that her family would not know what she had done. In the morning, the warrior went out hunting and caught a fat seal. That evening, the whole family feasted on the rich meat, and soon the selfish young wife lay fast asleep in the lodge. At midnight, the young warrior rose and went to the shore. Using his wife's spell, he summoned the herring and filled a basket with the largest of the fish. When the girl woke in the morning, she saw her husband and his mother eating roast fish beside a crackling fire. The old mother savored each mouthful and kept darting triumphant looks at the selfish young girl. Then the young wife knew that her shameful behavior had been discovered. After greeting her husband pleasantly, the young girl left the lodge and walked casually toward the woods. As soon as she was out of sight, she took to her heels, running as fast as she could toward the mountains, fearful of her husband's wrath. She heard the warrior as she heard the warrior call her name and heard him running after her. She flung herself up the mountainside, clambering up a large boulder that stood in her way. As the girl climbed, she felt her body growing smaller and smaller. She gasped in fear as she realized that the magic she had used so selfishly was turning against her in punishment for the crimes she had committed against her starving family. She felt feathers sprouting from her arms and face, and when she cried out, the only sound she could make was a soft hooting noise. By the time the young warrior reached the boulder, the girl's transformation was complete. He found himself face to face with a small owl that gazed up at him with his wife's large, pleading eyes. He reached out to her, not knowing what to do or say. The owl backed away from his hand, and he saw the humanity fading from its eyes. The owl shook itself, stretched its wings, and flew away into the forest, hooting plaintively. The warrior gazed after his transformed wife sadly. He had planned to treat her gently, to woo her away from her selfishness with his love and his kindness, but the evil forces she had used so selfishly had taken her, and there was nothing he could do but return to his lodge and tell his old mother what had happened. To this day, the plaintive hoot of the owl may be heard in the wilds of Alaska, reminding those who hear it of the price of a young girl once paid for her selfishness. The price a young girl once paid for her selfishness. Well, that's the end of that one. I guess. Thing about selfishness is, again, you shouldn't be so egocentric. Like, I'm sure that's the reason why so many people are addicted to supporting animal agriculture these days. I mean, at least in the United States, like, I realize in this story, these people were, like, living off the land, just getting whatever they could. They barely had enough to eat, or, yeah, so they didn't really have other options than killing the animals. But, I mean, in highly developed nations, if you're at least reasonably wealthy, it's like there's tons of plans, like there's agriculture, people's jobs, and you pick it up at the store. It's really easy. But I don't know why his wife was, hugging all the fish. I mean, if she could cast a spell to get all the fish, then why did you just take two just for herself? I mean, she could have shared some with, like, the guy's wife. Sounds like she could have really used some of that fish, and, I don't know, if you can use a magic spell to get the fish, why not take all the fish? Or, well, most of the fish, because, if you take them all, that's a clear cutting and then don't come back. So last story. This one's from Arkansas in the United States. One rainy autumn, a traveler got lost in the mountains of Arkansas. He was tired and hungry, and so was his horse. Night was approaching. All at once, he saw a cabin. A squatter sat on the porch, fiddling the same tune over and over. The traveler asked the squatter for food and water for himself and his horse. The squatter replied, "Ain't got a thing in the house." The traveler asked where the next house was. The squatter said, Dunno, I ain't never been there. The frustrated traveler asked if he could spend the night. The squatter replied, House lakes, my wife, and me sleep on the only dry spot. Why don't you mend the roof? Asked the traveler. Can't mend the roof on a rainy day. The whole time, the squatter continued to fiddle the same tune over and over. The traveler stopped. Why don't you finish that tune? Can't get the tune of, can't get the turn of the tune. The traveler took the fiddle, played the turn of the tune, and finished it. Stranger said the squatter. Grab yourself a chair and sit down. Sal, cut a hunk out of that deer and cook it. Son, get the whiskey and put the horse in the shed. You just play away, stranger. Tonight, you can sleep on the dry spot. That one wasn't really. I don't know what to make of it. There was barely a conflict. Yeah, that's the only thing. Stories, they're good when they have conflict. I mean, conflict is kind of what makes a story, but that one's just folk tale. I don't know, I tried doing an Arkansas accent, or I don't know, I hadn't spent too much time in Arkansas, so I hope that one was kind of entertaining or somewhat like an Arkansas thing. Okay, bye guys, enjoy your quarantine, spend your time alone, it's not that bad. Especially when we have access to the internet, but I mean, you can use the time alone to contemplate on, just meditate or keep your eyes closed until you see sort of images, and then you'll get inspired to paint a pretty picture. And I'm sure that's how all artists throughout history, or most of them, they just I know Salvador Dali has a book, Cien Años de Soledad, and was it no, it's Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Salvador Dali, he spent a lot of time alone. There were all those artists that just, as soon as they left college or whatever, they just spent a very long time in isolation. So I'm sure that's how they got their ideas. They just would meditate for a real long time. I mean, I read that Salvador Dali actually, his method to get his ideas was sit in a hardback chair, and he had a heavy rock in his hand and a metal plate as feet. He'd sit there until he starts to fall asleep, and when he falls asleep, he'd release the rock would hit the metal plate, he'd hear the sound as he went to sleep, and then he'd project or whatever, keep consciousness while asleep. So remember that song? Somewhere between the sacred suns asleep. Disorder, disorder, disorder. Yeah, System of a Down, they got some good ideas. They really know how to sum up the whole struggle. Struggle's real. Well, actually, no. People overhype things. Like me, I tend to overreact to stuff. And we live in a highly developed nation, so what's there to complain about? World's what you make it. Just like that Barbie song. Paper, plastic, whatever. Or, I'm made of plastic, so life is your creation, and yeah, so keep thinking about it, guys. Meditate, take the time to maybe write a book or write poetry or paint or whatever. Bye.